hope like you also like have brought something nice to drink for our coffee chat here. The idea is that we like someone from our Condens team will speak with you about like a topic related to user research, and I will also like highlight some of the features of Condens and show you how Condens can help you with sharing user research today. To get started, I wanted to share like a little bit about me. As you maybe like have guessed already, like I'm coming from the field of communication, but I transitioned to the field of user research a few years ago. So my background is in communication science, and I worked in different positions around social media strategy, creating communication concepts, and working in the field of digital communication and content management. And I always found it super interesting when working on like those communication topics to focus on not just the sending part, but also like really having a conversation and a discussion. So to work with the feedback as well that you, for example, receive on social media. And that was also like one of the first steps that made me interested in looking more into how to really have the conversations with users, participants, people out there of the organization, and to learn from them, to learn how they what are their challenges, their needs, and that made me interested in finding ways to incorporate it in my work. And that was also like one of the starting points where I slowly like transitioned into the field of user research. About like other things about me, like I'm based in Munich in Germany, and most of the Condens team. Outside of work, I enjoy like doing some sporty activities. Like my favorite combination is like a mix of like flowy yoga classes, and then combining it with some like more strength focused circuit training classes. So I think that's my favorite combination in sports, and that helps me also to balance work and work life a little bit better. Another fact about me, like in the past, I also organized for several years some camps for children from the age 6 to 12, which was super interesting. I was really involved in that area. And another fact about me, like for this coffee chat, I thought maybe like would be interested to share my favorite setup. So when I start working, I like to have actually like a three drinks ready. So I always make like my coffee, but at the same time I prepare already like my tea following after my coffee, and also like my sparkling water to be ready for the entire day as well. So that's a little bit about me. And now let's dive into the topic of sharing user research and what we can learn from communication. So when it comes to sharing user research, or like general user research process, there are different elements that like I think are part of most of the research processes. I don't think there's like a very like standardized process, but I think typical elements that come up in different research processes are like planning research, conducting user research, then definitely like analyzing, making sense of the data, and then share what you've learned at one point. I think the sharing part can happen beyond the end of the project. And I also like, I know that like with this, when thinking about the sharing of user research, that this is like a common challenge for a lot of researchers. And it can be quite hard to get insights seen and incorporated and also discussed in organizations. So I think it could be interesting angle to look at like maybe inspiration from the communication field today. And also I think like effectively sharing user research is like equal to communicating well what you've learned, what you've discovered in a research project. So today we'll look at what to bring from communication to user research. For example, like applying communication principles to decide what to share, when to share something, and in what kind of format you want to share research data. I will go through like different pieces of communication strategies that I personally worked on before, that came up in different roles. And then like I will explain you like the principle or the approach, why this was like helpful in the field of communication. And then we try to transfer it to user research and also look at some examples. And I think maybe it's interesting for you as well, because I think all of us are always like involved in maybe the receiving side of like communication. I mean, the area of where like organizations, for example, communicate with their target groups. And we like as receivers, we see like a lot of the content here. Maybe it's interesting to look at like this communication model today from also the other side, and think a bit about the sender perspective and what to consider here when you want to reach a certain audience, how you can develop the message and find a good way to send the message. I think this can be super helpful to make more people engage with our research in a meaningful way, and also that this can help to translate research findings into strategies, and also to bring it into conversations happening in your organization, and therefore to have like a bigger impact with research. Okay, so let's quickly also look at the topic of analysis and repository tools here. So when it comes to sharing user research, like I think a dedicated analysis and repository tool can help you to easily share different types of user research data and outcomes, from raw data to final reports, and also helps you to make the research more accessible by also keeping like full control over the access. So I think like in combination, this works well. Today we will be looking at the part of where you actively like point different stakeholders towards user research, and not so much about like the general idea of a self-serve repository, which is also like part of the general sharing concept, but I will focus on pointing stakeholders to different types of research. All right, so the first principle I brought with me today from communication is define and get to know primary target audience. So this is like the basis of like any communication concept I developed in the past, or I worked on. Like you have to find out who are the people most interested in your messaging, and who are the people that you intend to speak to in order to achieve your goals. So, for example, who are the people who are most likely to purchase a product or a service, and you have to really think more about that and find out how you can describe your target audience. And I think the more precise you can do that, the more effective the like following communication can be. And also there can be multiple like different target audiences here, where you can focus on with different communication concepts. So for user research, maybe it's a no-brainer for researchers, maybe not. I think we are really good at understanding users and people, and typically our participants, but we can also make use of all like the skill set here and the methods, and when thinking about communicating to our stakeholders. So we could see our stakeholders as well as like participants, for example, and really try to slip into their shoes and understand their needs, their challenges. And I think it's a super important step to get started when you think about how can I effectively share user research to get to know the people you're preparing the data for, and the people who should be impacted by what you've discovered. And then you can use what you've learned here to just tailor your communication approach accordingly. So this can like touch, for example, on exploring how your stakeholders speak, the terminology they use, and then make your research like resonate with that. For example, so you can like try to see the stakeholders as research participants. And one like way how you could go about this is, for example, by also doing like stakeholder interviews. I linked like one example here. There's like a template and the explanation of a framework from Laura Faulkner, and she like developed this framework when to make use of when like a stakeholder comes to you with a research question, and it helps you to like discover in a structured way what's the underlying like question behind the research question. So to really understand where this like research question comes from. And I think like this can be like here's a preview of how the template looks like. There are different questions you can discuss with your stakeholders, and I think you can adapt that framework a little bit, and also like try to understand a little bit better how they communicate. So where are your stakeholders communicating? Which meetings are part of their schedule? How busy they are in general? And also like what are their current goals and projects? So like there are different things around that I think could be super helpful to maybe take a moment to collect what would be important for you to come up with like a communication like strategy or some idea, and then try to really learn about the stakeholder side here and try to build up that understanding. The second thing from communication, like across several projects, like I always like we had to find a way to make it very easy for like the audience to take away at least like one thing when they like get in touch with like a communication of our side or a content piece of our side. So like the idea of that from like communication, like for example, is to when you think of social media and people using social media, they typically use it and have like a very short attention span. And also there's you're part of like so much content and you're in between various topics. So people will content and only have like a limited time to interact with the content here or decide to spend like a limited time here. So it's super important to make it very easy for people to directly like get into the content, and also to make it easy to take like maybe one idea, one argument, one quote away when just like interacting for like a short period of time. So this is like one possibility for you to get in touch with someone. And I think to also like communicate platform friendly, it's important to also think of how this piece of information is already valuable for a person that only sees the content for like a super short period of time. So to think of like the key point that you want to convey here, I think it's super important. And to bring that into the field of user research, I think we can take away a few things from that communication principle. So we can also think of how to communicate very clearly and make it easy for our stakeholders to take away not something. I think that's the main, like that's the real the difference, but like something I want to emphasize, because I think we as researchers we should think of like what's the one thing that maybe stakeholders should take away, even if they only see like a snippet of my research for a short period of time. So we can think of ways to make it easy to understand the messages. For example, by writing headlines and summaries that are super like easy to scan and go through, and they don't need much time to consume. With a focus on like giving the right impression here, so not like being too leaning into what's a direction of like clickbaiting or something, but really focusing, okay, what's the impression we like I want the stakeholders to take away, but then making use of like all the possibilities I have to convey a message, even when people only like interact a little bit with my content. So how this can look like in Condens, for example, for different types of research outcomes, like we call them artifacts in Condens. I think it's a super good idea to think of how to make use of titles and summaries here. So people seeing like an overview of existing artifacts, for example, can already like see what is there, and maybe even take like the main observation away by having like a very descriptive title, so to say. So I always like try to like after creating an artifact or while doing that to think of the summary as well. There's also the possibility to get a little bit of assistance or like a suggestion by AI that I can use as a starting point. And then I try to really make it very, very direct and clear, so that people can really understand what this is about. And even if they don't go deeper into the content from that, that they take away like an impression of like what we've learned in research so far. So this is an example where like I think you can see like the importance of like the title and the summary. So when sharing a research finding in Slack, this can look like this, for example. Like my team, my stakeholders directly see in Slack what this research finding is about. And even if they don't find time or don't have like the interest at the moment to go into the details, there's already like the chance for me to convey a little bit of information. So I think we can think of that as well. Another point that I think is interesting in that context. So we want to make it really easy for people to take something away. And sometimes this is like a little bit different with like complex reports, for example. So when you have something like that, you can also think of splitting it up in different parts. For example, in this report, we have like several research findings. And at one point, it's super interesting to have it all together and maybe also like go through that together with different stakeholder groups, but it can be a lot. So I think it can be a good idea to also maybe like split up the different findings and like create a communication across single pieces of them. For example, here, I think we have, you can see it on the right, we have like 4 findings. We could think of, okay, maybe sharing like with the stakeholders 4 different findings individually. Like you can spread out the time period of where you share findings and make it a little bit easier to take away the main observation you had here. Along those lines, like from communication, there was always like this discussion of like the approach to find very engaging snippets to reach the target audience. Sometimes also referred to as snackable content for social media. So that means it goes along actually with the point before, to share something that can be consumed as a snack. So it does not take long time to consume it. But it's also like it's it's like not a full meal, but also like it's a snack, so it's something smaller, but it's also okay to only like consume like a smaller piece here. And this can be like a good strategy to focus on like engaging snippets, snackable snippets, to create first interactions in communication, and maybe make the audience interested in diving in, read an article, watch a panel talk, or whatever content you have here in the communication field. Also, like in social media, this is also important to like think of engaging elements and to initially be get content seen and follow like the rules of social media. So there's like this approach of encouraging interaction and engagement by asking questions, having like multimedia content, and running polls and all that kind of things to really like make it more engaging, to increase the chance that people interact with your content. What that means for user research, I think we can also make use of like those smaller scoped, snackable research pieces. For example, we can when people like are already somehow like, no, let me phrase it a little bit differently. So I think it does work to really make people interested in learning more. And when you share like a super engaging snippet, interesting quote of a participant, for example, in a Slack channel, it removes the initial barrier of going to a different document or a different report or a different link. And then you find a way to bring that piece of like content in an interesting way to where the stakeholders already are. I think this is like a great strategy to bring in stakeholders into your research, and it can work in between a busy day. And I think it's a good idea to always offer a way to dig deeper. So besides like sharing a single like highlight or a small snippet, I think it's always a good idea to have something in addition to lead people to like the area where they can find out more, or where they can dive deeper. In Condens, I show you like I brought an example how this can work and how you can easily like share, for example, a single highlight from a transcript you have with your team or stakeholders in Slack. So you can simply highlight an interesting part of a transcript, directly like copy the link and share it with your team, and they will be able to see, not just receive the link, but already see the video snippet, including the subtitles here in Slack, so where they are already. So it's really, it removes the barrier to like switching tools, and also it's already like an interesting piece that allows people to dive in. Okay, so the video. How I do that in my work is I use also like single highlights to share more detailed artifacts. In that case, I use like an interesting quote, something that stood out for me in the research data, shared it directly in Slack, but then added like the entire artifact here, as well as a link. And also like I used this as an announcement for an upcoming workshop where I wanted to work with my colleagues through what we've learned in a research project. So that's another example. Okay, so thinking about communication principles, I brought the idea of combining relevant touch points with me today. Sometimes it's also called like creating a multi-channel concept, for example, or even like a 360-degree communication concept. But basically, that means to contact the target audience through many different platforms. It can touch both like traditional communication and marketing platforms, also digital platforms. And I think it's helpful to think of it like where can I get in touch with my stakeholders? Where can I get in touch with the people who should see the research? And think about like actually the locations where I can meet them, both physical and digital. Can be interesting here. So for user research, I think we need to break it down a little bit. It can be a huge approach. It can feel like overwhelming, but I think we can use the general idea here and take away some things of that. So you can think of multiple ways to share research with your stakeholders and go beyond the idea of like, or beyond the concept of sharing a final report once. So you can think of, for example, like internal channels that you have inside your organization, also like internal blogs, for example, intranet or things like that, to make use of that as well. And also maybe for like bigger discovery research projects, it could also be interesting to think of the physical space a little bit and think of like printing interesting quotes on posters, for example. On a smaller scoped level, I think another idea is to think of the personalization here. So you can try to share the research in multiple ways by like shifting the focus a little bit depending on the audience, making like other elements the focus point when sharing research and make it like more relevant to them. So we're running a little bit out of time, but I'm moving on to like the examples. So for example, like I mentioned, you can share specific parts of a research report and directly point people towards like the relevant chapter for them, and not share like a long document with them or like a very rich in content piece of research artifact, rather pointing them to the area that's relevant for them. And you can grab from any artifact, you can grab a link to the chapters in between, to the clusters that you have in a research artifact, and create like a direct link to that area, and you can make use of that as well. So along that lines, I think I mentioned it several times that it's like interesting to think of where your stakeholders are, where do they communicate, and I think a way to share research here in a meaningful way is by bringing the relevant parts of research directly to that area. So there are also different ways how you can embed research. For example, here, like I embedded like a part of a research report in a Notion page, and like stakeholders working on like with the Notion page can directly see in like this little preview here the relevant part without the need to go switch tools or to go somewhere else. And it's really easy to share research by bringing it to where your stakeholders are. Another example is for Jira here. So you can, like here, you can see an example where I added like a relevant single highlight of a research interview to a Jira ticket here. And also like I added a link with a preview to the full report here. And people, without going to a different place, they can already see get a little bit of like a glimpse of what this research highlight is about. And by like seeing the title here of the highlights, they see the preview of the video here, they see that there is a video. So I think there are different, like it's a great idea to share research parts in an interesting way as well. For communication, a huge part is around like storytelling, finding stories and creating stories to convey information in a way that it can stick better with the audience. And stories, for example, are just more memorable and can help to create and reveal emotions. So that's why they work in communication. And I think this is like a really great part about user research, that we don't have to come up with stories here. And I think we can really make use of that principle. And I think with research, we are in the lucky position that we already have the stories. Like we are in contact with the participants. We've done the research. We've heard about like the pain points, the goals, and user desires. So we have a lot of stories already. And I think we don't have to, and also we should not come up with the stories, but we can make use of them and tell them to really convey the depth of our findings and make the experience more understandable and make it easier for stakeholders to also develop empathy. So I think it can be extremely powerful to make use of that when you think of sharing research and bring that into the different ways you share user research data. An example from my work is this journey map artifact. So here, like this was like a bigger research project, and we looked at like a process of different of users who are thinking about introducing potential tools with their teams. And we had several interviews, and we learned about the different steps here. And to also like discuss it with the team, we've split up the different steps here and added like the real quotes and stories of the people we spoke to the different steps here. And I will zoom into one example here. So part of thinking about like this experience journey map was that teams have, like they do need to assess potential risk when introducing a new software tool. And this was split up in multiple parts. And we looked at like the step of like the first part of the risk assessment. And when sharing it with the team, like we highlighted like some like quotes that really like help us to explain that step with like for the entire team, and to also see how like the people feel in that when going through the step, what are the pain points here, the challenges. And we looked at like for the different steps, we followed the structure of the story of like different participants in our sample, and saw how they like experience the entire journey by looking at like interesting snippets here. And the last point from like the last communication principle I have brought with me today is the idea of communicating close to the time of an event, or even communicating live. And why this works in communication, it's like this it can bring a certain urgency with it and relevance with it, and also at the same time, like live formats are supported by various platforms and get displayed to more people. So that's why it's interesting for many communication concepts. And I think for user research, it can mean, I mean, obviously, like it's an ideal scenario to involve stakeholders directly while you conduct research and have them like as observers in sessions. But I know that that's not always possible, and also you often want to involve more people than what is like possible for a typical research session. So I think we can think of it in a way that we can share snippets like close to the event of a research session, for example. So you can like closely after the event, you can share like a summary, maybe like something that stood out to you, something that was surprising, with your stakeholders, and like use of like this the factor that it's like new input that was just gathered, and you can make use of that. But also like I think we should be aware of the responsibility here, that you still like set the right context and make sure that that it's like backed up by the actual research data. Another interesting thing about that is that I think if you share the snippets frequently, stakeholders can learn small things every so often, and this is maybe easier to digest than like an information dump that happens all at once. So here's an example how this looked like for one of the research projects I worked on. Like I shared after a research interview, I shared a summary with my team, and also I created like a cluster of like interesting highlights of the session, and then like grabbed the link easily in Condens and added it to my Slack message here, and then the team already like saw like the preview with like the 3 little clips attached directly in Slack, without the need to go to like a different area, which made them like which made it easy for them to dive in. All right, so it's like it was like a little overview of, or like a overview of some principles that I applied in different communication related roles before, and I think that is still helpful for me as a user researcher now. And like you maybe noticed that I've added several like plans here throughout the presentation, and like in German we have a saying like there's a colorful arrangement of possibilities, and you describe it as a colorful bouquet of flowers. And like a bouquet of flowers does not really fit with our brand, but different types of plants do. So I selected the different plants here, and I think we can really think of it like as a collection of possibilities, not necessarily connected with each other, but rather working in a way that you can pick and choose what works for you. You can select like one inspiration, one idea here, and try it out and how it works in your context. And I think with different features in Condens, it's easier to like follow some of the principles here, and maybe to communicate in a bit of a different way.